My coffee brownies recipe is easy and delicious. These brownies are super dense, fudgy, chewy, and chocolatey. The bit of instant coffee really bringing out the chocolate flavor. These are perfect for any chocoholic's craving, so if you want the perfect brownie recipe, here it is. For one 8x8 casserole dish, you will need 1 stick of unsalted butter and a 1/4 cup of vegetable oil. I am using canola. 1 full cup of unsweetened cocoa powder. I'm using 80 grams. 1 cup of dark brown sugar, 240 grams. You could use light if you want, but I'm going to go with dark. 1 cup of white sugar, 210 grams. 3 large eggs at room temperature. 1/2 cup of all-purpose flour, as I measure 75 grams. 1 tablespoon of instant coffee. 1 teaspoon of vanilla, and 1/2 teaspoon of salt. I know that's a lot of salt, but salt really brings out the flavor in chocolate. And I'm sure you probably noticed that there is no baking powder. A lot of fudgy brownie recipes do not have any leavening agent, so that they're denser, thicker, and chewier. The first step in this recipe is melting the butter, so I'm going to put this in the microwave. Now that my stick of butter is melted, I'm going to add my cocoa powder to it. Adding cocoa powder to a hot liquid like hot water or melted butter or hot oil is called blooming the cocoa powder. People say that it brings out the chocolate flavor. I bloom the chocolate when I'm making cakes, so I'm going to try to bloom the chocolate when I'm making these brownies. So that is why I'm going to add the chocolate to the melted butter. Just stir to combine. You could sift it in if you want, but the butter is hot, so those lumps in the cocoa powder are going to smooth themselves out for the most part. So that's combined. Now I'm going to add the coffee. Now it's time to cream the butter and the eggs. I'm going to add the eggs to my bowl along with the sugar. Like I said, 1 cup of white sugar, 1 cup of dark brown sugar or light brown, whichever you prefer. And now I'm going to beat them together with my handheld electric mixer. You can definitely do this by hand with the whisk or even a fork if you want, but I think an electric mixer will help because, as I said earlier in the video, there is no baking powder. So what's going to give these brownies a bit of rise, what's going to help them rise, is the air that I'm going to whip into the eggs. I'm going to start beating them and I'll show you what they look like. I beat the eggs and sugar together on medium speed for about 3 minutes, and this is what they look like. As you can see, they've increased a lot in volume. They're really foamy and frothy. I personally would not consider this to be the ribbon stage. That's when you can put your beaters or spatula or whisk, whatever you're using, into the eggs and sugar and go like that on top of the batter, and it leaves a trail that does not fade in immediately. I think this is on its way, but it's not quite there. That's just too much time for me, but honestly, I think it'll be okay like this. Now I'm going to add the oil to the chocolate. I'm doing this so that I can bring down the temperature of the chocolate, because I am going to combine it with the eggs, and I don't want to accidentally cook the eggs. Like I said, I don't want to accidentally cook the eggs, so I'm going to add the chocolate mixture 2 to 3 tablespoons at a time. And then I'm going to incorporate the chocolate by folding. Whenever you're combining 2 things of different densities, the airy eggs and the denser chocolate, it's better not to stir circular in a circular motion, but to fold. So take your spatula or wide spoon, bring it down to the bottom, and then bring it back up. Folding is going to make it a lot easier to incorporate the chocolate. The cocoa powder, butter, and oil mixture is almost totally combined into the sugar and eggs. So I'm going to, before I forget, add the vanilla, 1 teaspoon, and half a teaspoon of salt. And now it's time for the flour. What I am going to do as I'm preheating my oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit is I'm going to use the strainer and I'm going to sift the flour in. And just like with the cocoa powder and butter and oil, I'm going to fold it in a little at a time. I probably added the chocolate mixture 1/4 of it at a time, and I'll probably do the same with the flour. It takes a bit of patience, but it's the best way to go about things so that you don't deflate the batter and that the brownies still turn out nice and fudgy. The flour is now totally incorporated into the coffee brownie batter. So now I'm going to pour it into my 8x8 baking dish. As you can see, it is lined with parchment paper. What I did is I buttered the casserole dish. It's a glass casserole dish. Then I put in some wax paper. Then I buttered that as well. Fudgy brownies like these have a tendency to stick. So a lot of recipes online call for putting parchment paper into your baking dish. You can use aluminum foil. I've used that as well and it's fine. So if you do not want to have to scrape, you want to be on the safe side, line your dish with something. I'm going to bake my coffee brownies at 350 Fahrenheit. I'll let you know for how long. I just pulled my brownies out of the oven. They were in at 350 degrees Fahrenheit, uncovered, for 1 hour, 60 minutes. These brownies had a mostly smooth surface with a few cracks, what a lot of people would consider to be ideal. They also smelled good, so I couldn't wait to dig in. And when I did, I knew that my coffee brownies with instant coffee recipe was absolutely delicious. First of all, these brownies had a really strong chocolate flavor. I did use a full cup of cocoa powder, so that's to be expected. And even though I used 2 cups of sugar in these brownies, the unsweetened cocoa powder helped to balance out the sweetness, giving these more of a dark chocolate flavor. Speaking of the sugar, you could definitely just use 2 cups of plain white sugar, but I think that using at least 1 cup of light or dark brown sugar is a good idea because a lot of chocolate chip cookie recipes call for brown sugar. The molasses in brown sugar not only makes both chocolate chip cookies and brownies chewy, it also helps to bring out the chocolate flavor. So that's why I suggest using at least 1 cup of light or dark brown sugar in this recipe. And of course, we can't forget the coffee. There was a bit of a coffee flavor in this. It wasn't super strong, but it was there. I think that primarily what it did is it helped to bring out the chocolate flavor. I think the bitterness in the coffee helped to tone down the sweetness as well. Now that I've cut a piece, you can see that the inside was definitely fudgy. The top was a bit crispy, so there was a nice contrast in textures. I also think it's surprising that these coffee brownies rose so much in the oven, considering that I didn't add any baking powder or baking soda. Like I said earlier, the lift comes from whipping air into the eggs, so that's a very important step. If you don't have an electric mixer or you don't feel like whisking them by hand, then I would just make sure that the eggs and sugar are combined and then add maybe 1/8 of a teaspoon of baking powder. And also, when it's time to add in the chocolate and the flour, make sure that you fold and not stir so that you don't deflate the eggs. Although I think that these coffee brownies with strong instant coffee were definitely a success, I'm still not quite sure how long to bake these. Somehow I lost the footage from the first attempt, but the first time around I only baked the brownies for 40 minutes, and even though they were fine around the edge, they were underdone in the middle. With the full hour of baking in the oven, they were definitely still fudgy in the center, but around the edge, I don't know if you saw when I was cutting them, they were maybe a bit tough, so I would try 50 minutes. Also, the first time I made these, I added one 10-ounce bag of semi-sweet chocolate chips, and now that I've had both versions, I actually think they were better with the chocolate chips. I would add about 3/4 of a 10-ounce bag to the brownie batter, and then I would save a quarter of the bag to put on top of the batter once it's already in the pan when you bake it. That way, some of the chocolate chips will be on top and you'll be able to see them. Like I already said, this coffee brownies with instant coffee recipe was easy and delicious. You can eat them plain, with whipped cream, vanilla ice cream, or even hot fudge. Any way you eat them, they're going to be amazing. I hope you give this recipe a try. As always, thanks for watching. See you next time.